Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates. Welcome everyone to this very special round table. One of the things that women professionals in any space struggle with is how gendered do we want our identity to be? And that's a question that applies in particular to the creative space. As a journalist, I've often wrestled with that question, and I'm sure that some of our most creative producers and directors in the space of the OTT universe, the universe of film production and direction, wrestle with it every day. The fact of the matter is that we can run but not hide from our gender. It defines us, it accompanies us in everything that we do and in our way of looking at the world. So is there a female gaze that is finally replacing the male gaze? It is my pleasure to host this roundtable of some of the brightest sparks in the world of cinema, men or women. I don't think they're here because they're women, but they are also here because they're women. And that also is the space that we're going to navigate a little bit and explore a little more deeply. Let me introduce them all one by one in no particular order. I'm just going to call them out so our audience gets to know them a little bit better. We have Ashi Dua, who's produced films like Love Stories and Bombay Talkies. We have Ashvini Yardi, whom we know as some of, the producer of some of the most successful films, including Oh My God, but also the creator of Masaba Masaba. Welcome. Guneet Monga, friend. It's so good to see you again, Guneet, Oscar winner, but also the creator of Indian Women Rising, deciding that it's finally need for a women's collective in the world of cinema. Welcome, Guneet. Madhu Bhojwani, who's produced films like Hero and Airlift and Lucknow Central, among many, many other creative pieces. Welcome. Seher Latif is with us, who's produced works like Shakuntala Devi and Maska, as is Shivani Saran. Both of them have produced those works of art together. So welcome Shivani and Seher. And finally, Monika Shergill, who's of course leading at Netflix a lot of this content curation, creation, and really, in a sense, the architect of a new way of storytelling. And spectacular creative people on this round table, and it is my pleasure talking to all of you. And I'll start with you, Guneet, because one of the statistics that you've been talking about really stuck with me, which is that in the last few years, there are, 5%? When you did the numbers, you found that only 5% of directors were women making all of these films. And so I think we've got 90% of that 5% in one room right now at this round table. But more seriously, that's not a happy number. And for all of us who don't want to be prefaced with our gender, that's not a number you can hide from.
Absolutely, Barkha. I think that's what led us to think, introspect a bit, and just bring that number in front. This is a 2019 study that I came across, and I think there has been an influx of more talent now, and even conversations like this. So thank you, Netflix, for organizing this. Even conversations like these, talking, because we're all in our place decision makers, and being aware of a certain data is just important for us to make better choices, to be more aware as we go along with our business. And while we have that lens, I think it is now rapidly changing, and Netflix being at the forefront of it, of having so many women stories and also women creators. And that female gaze is something that, like how you see, if I have to tangibly explain this to you, how do you see a Wonder Woman and how a Wonder Woman is shot, whereas how you see Halle Berry in like a Catwoman, so I think that female gaze is now something that is really important, and that perspective to shift as we are getting more aware. Like I've always said that we are all products of patriarchy. We are all negotiating feminism and figuring it out. And with more information, we can empower more, we can amplify more, and we can have more such conversations which inform our upcoming decisions. So, yeah.
And it's important to stress, Guneet, that there isn't a monolithic female gaze, that we all navigate it in ferociously personal ways, and that we often wrestle perhaps with our own inbuilt sexism. I find myself halting sometimes in even language that I use, as a very, very assertive feminist, saying, hey, where did I get that word from? I'm not free from socialization. I don't know if you feel you are.
No, absolutely. And I think also because for so long we've been boxed, and for so long the conversations have been that, you're too aggressive. If you're ambitious, you are too, I mean, I've been told you're a fluke, you're a Punjabi, because I
I
want to
mean,
run
you
a
are a Punjabi.
I am a
You're also
Punjabi, but
Punjabi.
in a manner of light, thrown in a light which is like,
Yeah, sure.
but so it's time to actually shapeshift that self for our own self and then empower another. So I am ambitious. I want to run a celebrated production house, and I want to tell Indian stories to the rest of the world. And it's long. There's no point hiding that. I mean, and we get validation more amongst ourselves with our peer group, and of course with our stories doing well, trending, winning awards is not something that you plan for, but it's the intention that you bring to the table.
Yeah. Monika, let me bring you in. You came from Meerut, small town in Uttar Pradesh, and you became a journalist before you became this big honcho at Netflix. But it was all about telling stories, whether as a journalist doing environmental journalism. I don't know how many people know. You started with a sort of docu-series called Living on the Edge, which used to be produced by a small production house called Meditech. And I remember I used to do voiceovers for them. And I must share a funny story with you. I was
And
rejected
I
the
used
first
to
time.
really look up to you that time too, Barkha. So I must add that. And so many of you have inspired me to actually start what I did at that time.
So talk a little bit about those years, those years when you enter as the girl from Meerut into the business of storytelling, into the business of journalism. Did you ever dream that you could be here today, basically not just deciding what a whole country watched in 2020, locked down in that COVID, minus me who was out there traveling, but most of the country, and also be such a successful sort of, leader in the space yourself? That journey from that girl in Meerut who wanted to tell stories to the vice president today at Netflix. Talk a little bit about that.
Actually, to you, what you said earlier, did I ever imagine that? Actually, it's a resounding no. I had no idea. All I knew at that time that I saw a lot of journalists filing their stories, speaking their truths, and really reporting from the field. And I can't tell you, seeing so many of you on the black and white television at home in my 10th grade is when I decided I used to really love the world this week. And that audio, so-and-so, Surya Gangadharan reporting from so-and-so, XYZ from Afghanistan. I just cannot tell you how that used to give me the goosebumps at that time. And I used to just want to be there doing that. And that was the journey that I started on. And as an environment journalist, and actually environment is my passion. It's something that I care deeply for. So I think I landed in the right place. And like Guneet keeps saying, it's the intention. So I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to tell the real stories of real people. And the intention was there to really care for the environment. So I just landed there. And I traveled the country from being in the forests, for days on end, reporting on, as many people would say, the boring Sal borer beetles and how they were eating up the forest, to sitting on the really hot, rocks at Dhanbad mines and reporting from there, and the cotton farmer suicides. I mean, I still feel and remember those days of mine. And then moving to entertainment, it's been quite a journey for me. I've been inspired by so many men and women along the way, and actually really been lifted by so many. And so many of my managers and my bosses have been women. And that has really it's like you don't plan, and every next step just reveals the one coming after it. And that's what it's been. Even currently at Netflix, I'm surrounded by so many amazing women, I can't tell you. And I feel so incredibly proud and privileged to be part of this company. Where the commitment to telling diverse stories and representing the underrepresented goes far beyond just what in normal parlance we call business.
Talk a little bit about the stereotyping of the female boss. right? There is the stereotype of the female boss. There's the stereotype that women aren't good to other women, that the moment you throw a bunch of women into the same room, they'll end up quarreling. There is the caricature of the cat fight. There's a bunch of you in that room. And, you know, men and women sometimes like each other, sometimes don't. And the same is true for women and women. But the moment a woman has a slightly aggravated response to another woman, the world caricatures it in a certain way. The female boss trope gets reaffirmed. Monica, what's it like to be a female boss?
You're so right about that, Barkha. And I've been a part seen a lot of boys' clubs out there in the corporate world. Though I think we are still lucky in the entertainment business because we have so many women. And that's been great. But even so, you're absolutely right. The minute you are a little aggressive, you're not, I won't call it being aggressive, if you're putting your point very emphatically, you know, and assertive. Exactly. You're perceived a certain way. Also, I should tell you...
Not that I think, by the way, that aggressive is a bad word. You wouldn't have had to interject and change it to assertive if you were a bunch of men.
And a short male, colleague or manager or boss is seen also very differently from a short female colleague or manager. That also comes a lot into play when you walk into boardrooms. You're part of... we've all... sort of experience that in different ways, whether you're the captain of a filming crew, you're the director and you're this diminutive person, or, you're a writer or producer. All of it sort of adds up. But I think last few years, it has been changing. Many of us have been challenging this intentionally, unintentionally. And I think, Guneet, you wanted to say something.
No, I just think that now even if I hear somebody saying another, like putting another female woman in a box, I'm just like, oh, she's a rock star. I love her, So it's about changing that narratives within ourselves, because I've seen the power of that. And in fact, the journey that I had with Netflix on Period End of Sentence was a specimen, was a journey of one woman empowering another. So, and that is beautiful. When sisterhood happens, like Monica was saying this morning. So the power of that, when we shine light on each other, when we are not even in the same room, is where the culture change happens.
I actually do have something to add, Barkha.
Please do go ahead, Seher.
Mine is the opposite. I was told I was too nice. That has been something I've had to sort of work on. It's as if it's only that aggressive woman who can get things done. Like, there isn't another way to be persuasive, to get things done, So mine has been just the opposite.
Very important.
I mean, just Seher, if you could just expand on that. I think what's important is that, of course, there's a sort of gender dimension to us, but like men, we are not one kind of women, and just like men are not one kind of men, so there will be some of you who are assertive. I'll tell you, I'm aggressive. I'm happy to own that word, and I don't think it makes me any less nice, and I don't think the two are opposites. But I think that monolithic sort of labeling, the prism through which sort of women are defined, even when we have to sort of gather in a room like this and talk about being women in the creative space, there's an assumption that's made about us. So my question to you is going to be this, Seher. What's the craziest or the silliest assumption that's been made about you as a woman in cinema?
You're too nice to be a producer. and that's another woman who has said that to me.
And you said what?
I internalized it until I'm sitting here today.
Wow. Yeah. Did it hurt you? Did it intimidate you? And that's going to be my next question. I want all of you to share one thing that made you halt and say, I can't do this. See, we all have moments of confidence, but we also have moments of self-doubt, and the world is a hostile place. So do you remember that moment, Seher, when you felt like, oh, maybe I overreached here? When someone's lack of confidence in you actually gets under your skin. Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, then I want to lash out. And then Shivani, who's my producing partner, will hold my hand. No, it happens. It happens all the time.
It's something that it's quite amazing you bring that up, because it's also about examples, right? When I first joined film, I didn't have any other women behind the camera in production. I got really lucky I joined in cinema in India in NFDC. I got very lucky with Neena Lat Gupta at that point in time as the MD, because I had come from a very different space of being in consulting, environmental consulting. Still love it, miss it. And over there, it was again a boys' club. It's consulting. I presumed I had to be like them, to be heard, to be noticed. And when I first came into this, again, you think it's producing. You're coming in with the assumption you need to be loud, abrasive. But what I learned very quickly, and I'm very thankful for that environment with those women at the NFDC and then the Film Bazaar, was no. It's absolutely fine to be the complete rainbow, depending on the situation, the person that you're speaking to, how you're feeling on that particular day, all of it. And the acceptance of that was what was very tough for me. I also used to get a lot, "You're a Punjabi."
Which is shorthand for any sort of assertive sort of being. Right?
Absolutely. I think it was on the last project that I was doing, a film project, that someone says, just turn the Punjabi down. And I was like, absolutely not. This situation requires me to be that. You want to call it Punjabi, you can. But this is how I will deal with it. And it's, the thing is, when we're given labels, and it happens more with women than men, you leave so much more out. You can call me aggressive, which I completely own as well. But like in this pandemic, I haven't had the need to be aggressive. I've had to tap into that part of me, which is, calling colleagues, speaking to them. We've panelized a psychotherapist in the company and just said, guys, just reach out to her anonymously. She won't get back to us. That is what was needed. If there was no pandemic, maybe I would have been aggressive and said hit timelines and hit budget. But we don't label people either, because we miss so much more of them.
Yeah.
Barkha, I wanted to add something, and this is something that I have faced.
Go ahead, yeah.
Is that, I've been a boss for quite some time now in corporates as well. And the thing which annoys me to no end, and I find it really, I can't tell you how disgusting, is when you are remotely attractive, or you dress up well, or you dress up in a certain way. They used to come up to me, these men, and would say, oh, but you are so good looking, you should be an actor. What are you doing off screen? You should be on screen. Which is so disgusting and demeaning, isn't, it just used to take me by a surprise. And, I've been in top positions, and, but men think that it's their right to come and tell you, oh, you should have been on screen, what are you doing here? Demeaning what I'm doing, just because I may be remotely attractive. I mean, it's just a thing that's taken for granted by the men.
Can I ask you a little bit more about, I remember, Ashvini, I was interviewing Hillary Clinton once, and she was Secretary of State in the United States of America, and she said, no matter what I do, like I could be negotiating like a peace deal, I could be doing something, but when journalists write about me, they will, in the parentheses, write about the clothes I was wearing, or whether I was having a good hair day or a bad hair day, in the way that they will not pay attention when it comes to men. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this focus, as you mentioned, on, yes, it could be a woman who men or other women think are attractive, or it could be someone they don't think is attractive. Either way, the focus on how a woman dresses, how she looks, what she weighs, is commented on, and it's considered acceptable, it's considered reasonable, even in mainstream media commentary.
And there have been interviews of mine when, the work that I was doing was appreciated, and that's why the journalists have come and they've spoken to me about. But the line of the thing has started about, oh, this lady who could have been on screen is, I'm like, what? I mean, you've come to me because you've liked what I've done and it's of my achievement, and that's how you start the interview, when it's printed. And it's just so appalling, I feel, is that a woman is judged on her looks, even if she's the boss.
Ashvini,
that's something.
Can I just say something to make you feel better? When Angela Merkel retired, we all know that the entire commentary was about the 4 suits she had.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was seen as, oh my God, how could that happen? That's so amazing that she only had 4 outfits.
Yeah.
despite being a woman leader and, sort of.
Exactly. And so I'm saying no matter which end of the sort of glamour spectrum you're perceived to be on, there will be this obsessive focus on what you're wearing or what you're not wearing. Let me bring in Ashi. Ashi, let's shift gear a little bit and talk about whether the female gaze looks at sex and sexuality in a different way than the male gaze does. You know, when you look at something like Lust Stories, do you think you had a gendered sort of gaze on that?
I'm going to talk about Lust Stories here. When we read the scripts of Lust Stories, whether it was Kiara's part, the way it was perceived, and it was a very successful film, but the way it was perceived, even the men who watched it, I remember the clip that went viral from Lust Stories was the one Kiara is trying to get an orgasm or use that machine. So that's the clip that went viral. And the idea when Karan was making it, or when he wrote it, was about a woman who is like, you know what, pleasure is not just for men. I'm going to come here, I'm not going to just be married to a man and not have the best part of it and only the man has it. So he wrote it with that intention, we made it with that intention, but the part that was taken away from it was just that part. So of course, that gaze is there. People take it, people consume it.
If I may just,
Yes.
because my company handles Kiara's work, and after the Last Stories was aired, I've got calls from producers across India saying that, what have you done? Why have you let her do this? You know, she'll never get work again. Nobody will take her as a mainstream actor, because that clip went viral.
Happening. You're saying, Ashvini, this is still happening.
It's still happening,
like
but
in
trust me,
time, it is still happening.
it's just a perception, actually, because, you know, after Last Stories was when Kiara noticed, and that was her rise. So today, the position that she is, it started with Last Stories. So it's not actually what happened, but that's how it was perceived would happen, you know. So before it even, it's just like, why did you let her do it? I'm like, but this is what the story
but
was.
a lot of female actors that we went to with that role said no for the same reason. And Kiara at that
In fact, we had a discussion. She asked me if she should do it, and I said, please go ahead. Because this is something that has never been done, and it must be done. So you must go ahead.
She was quite...
Actually, complete your point, and then I just want to open it up again. So you're saying that even if you do try and explore sexuality in a way that is different from how sort of the lingering male gaze's camera may have in the past, that is still what will get taken out and go viral, right? There is a kind of stereotyping of that content that will still happen.
Absolutely, and I think it'll continue to happen, but that shouldn't stop us from trying to say what we want to say or what we want to make. We will still be authentic to what we are trying to say, and sooner or later it'll turn around, hopefully.
Now, I want to ask all of you, and I'll start with you, Monika, how much gendering of your identity do you allow at a conscious or even a sort of subliminal level? And I was reminded, I was interviewing Mithali Raj once, and she said, the thing I hate the most is to be called the Sachin Tendulkar of cricket. Why am I not the Mithali Raj of cricket? And we have benchmarked success against sort of male icons for so long that even Indira Gandhi was called the only man in her cabinet. So I'm just wondering how all of you, in a very individual and different way, I'm sure, wrestle with how much your identity is gendered and how much of it is consciously gendered.
Thanks for asking that, Barkha, because this is something I think that all of us grapple with on a daily basis in different forums where there are so many more men than us. It's very rare to see a gathering like this. So I think for me, actually, personally, I like to wear my gender on the sleeve because of the attributes that the gender represents and what we bring to the table, the sensitivity that we bring to the table, the different perspectives that we bring to the table. So I don't fight shy of it. Yes, I've been in gatherings and corporate forums where there are so many of the men who are sort of the leaders, the general managers, the CEOs of the business, and yes, a woman leader there, they come to you out of being, showing some graciousness, but yes, there are many more male voices there, but I do think that this is changing in entertainment. Definitely there are far more women, and I think so many different kinds of companies coming and really having women leaders. More of us out there means more that will come there. And I think we should be unabashed about our gender.
You know, for
Does it? Sorry, I think.
what would
were
be
you wanting to
nice,
come in, Ashi?
yeah, I was just going to say, what would be nice is stop being called women producers, women directors. We are producers, directors, actors. So the minute you add the word women producers, there is a problem.
So I want to take this to Guneet because she just created Indian Women Rising and she created a women's collective. And I want to maybe ask if there is a kind of journey that age and living does to you. And if I were to look at my own life, when I was 26 and I went to report the Kargil war, I would have died if somebody had called me a female journalist. But today, having lived those 2 decades and more of journalism, I'm quite happy to own the fact that I'm a woman journalist because I know how much I've had to fight, like at least 10 times harder to get to the same spot. So I want credit for having been a woman and still having done it. So I'm wondering if that journey happens.
I wanted to say that I was 26 when I produced Gangs of Wasseypur. And even if you Google and see my pictures, I wanted to look 40. You know, I colored my hair white. I used to wear saris. I used to own a certain, just a body demeanor. I'm still not 40. Still few years away. But I've always, and it happens very subliminally. You only grow up to realize any sort of gaslighting, any sort of, that articulation happens much, much later in retrospective. But living those and pushing, and now I'm on the other spectrum where I'm doubling down on women, because I'm unabashedly doubling down on women in my team, in the stories that I tell, and it's happened. There is a conscious shift that's happened because. Pushed very hard to get that validation and only to realize I don't need it.
What was the most patronizing thing someone ever said to you when you were the 26-year-old trying to look 40?
Actually, there was a lot of people used to look through, so I used to be I had to send my points on a contract to my male colleague because my points would not be taken because she's a child, you can't tell us how to work, right? But and on the other spectrum, all you want your films and your stories to be successful, and once they are successful, then post Lunchbox I was called a fluke, and that is something that I internalized very deeply, and 3-4 years went away from my life of not being able to stand back from there, and having to release my movies, having to make those relationships, so I have internalized all this really deeply, that you're always put in a box. So I think now with a spiritual journey and some amazing women around me, I am on the other side where I'm just we need to balance a bit before we start talking about equality.
So let me take this to Seher. One of the reasons, and I hear Ashi because I think I've been in that space where I haven't been, I haven't wanted to be called a woman journalist till I started actually owning how much more I'd had to fight to get to that same place. And I'm just wondering, what your personal experience has been of that gaslighting that Guneet says is so entrenched that you almost don't notice it.
I want to speak more to the awakening, so to speak, that she spoke about, because what happens with that is that, yes, you own yourself a lot more, which I have. So I really don't have a problem with the woman producer label. But what does happen is guilt hits you. It's all those times that you should have or, stood up for yourself and you didn't. It's those instances that sort of play on your mind and you can't reverse the clock. So now I'm just being optimistic and looking at whatever change you can make going forth.
Yeah, I always say that women are shackled in chains of gold and nothing is more oppressive than the superwoman tag. And I'm just wondering how many of you have had to wrestle with that, the imagined perfection, the imagined you can do it all. And, let me take that to Ashvini and then to Shivani. I always remember the story that Indra Nooyi tells of coming back home and telling her mother she's got this great promotion at work, and her mother almost overlooks the story of the promotion and says, oh, it was your job to get the milk home today. Did you get the milk home today? And I just feel like our focus is so much on the equality at workspace that we don't talk about the equality at home. We don't talk about the sort of massive societal expectations of women, that even women start feeling like they failed if they can't be the superwomen. Ashwini, I'll start with you on that.
Barkha, if I
James
can
Bond.
just say, Madhu's
Yeah.
been beating the pants off everyone, all the men out there.
Oh,
in
Madhu,
various-
let's bring you in.
Yes.
Madhu, let's bring you in on that. Let's bring you in there. I'm so sorry. I should have come to you earlier. Madhu, go ahead.
No worries. Well, I'll just say one thing, which is that, my time in this industry, as an entrepreneur, it predates my time in this industry. And really, even though I've been an entrepreneur all my life, the journey from the proverbial back room to the boardroom, over all these decades has been pretty consistent, which is that, I remember there used to be this show called Remington Steele. I don't know how many of you ever remember it.
Wasn't it Pierce Brosnan?
That's right. That's
It was
right.
Pierce Brosnan,
And
yes.
I always felt that having had to always wear the pants in the business and run it with perhaps the double amount of aggression than my male peers, there was always this need to have a Remington Steele. I wouldn't say even a need, but I've had a lot of male employees, and when we went into a negotiating room, the natural thing for the person at the other side would always be to look to the male person in the room. And I thought that was very, very frustrating. And as a young professional, sorry, Barkha, were you saying something?
No, I just wanted you to build on this idea of the woman in the boardroom, because that actually speaks to the question I just asked. Because when you look at this woman in the boardroom in the ads, she's always sort of perfectly turned out. She always has sort of this dappled sunlight coming in through the giant window. She always has the perfect string of pearls. Her sari is always starched. She's always cutting deals, but she's also always making that phone call home to say, "Aaj matar paneer banao." And it comes back to my sort of this cliched superwoman chains of gold, as I call it. So if you can speak a little bit about being that woman in the boardroom, and I just want to then throw it open on the burden of perfection.
Well, I think there is a lot of burden, because we grow up with this ideal of the woman having to, have so many roles, which is the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, and the perfect homemaker, really, because that's what we've grown up with, right? I mean, Guneet talked about the fact that, as a society, we grow up in a patriarchal society. So those are the shackles you grow up with. So when you actually make it to the boardroom against all odds, those ideals really don't leave you. And it's bad enough that today, when people look to you, or even when women in the boardroom, their stories are highlighted, there's always this question about, how is it that she juggles all of these things, and how is it that she's able to look after her kids, etc.
Because you're expected to juggle it, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's my exact question.
Barkha,
how
can
we
I
have equality at work without equality at home? Anyone who wants to jump in.
Sorry, Barkha, can I just share something really funny?
Please.
And I was, listening to Madhu say that, when you have to take those calls and make food. So we were in this meeting room, and we had these male writers, and sorry, I don't even want to say male writers and female writers. We were in a script reading, and there were the producer, director, all of us, the team, and suddenly during narration, this call comes to one of the writers, a woman writer, and it's her help, and the phone buzzes, and she couldn't put it off, and she took it, and her cook was asking, "Didi, aaj kya banana hai?" I cannot tell you, she was so embarrassed. She literally slid off the chair. She went under the table. She took the phone and she said, "Koi bhi dal aur koi bhi sabzi." And we burst out laughing, and we
But
said,
I do this every day. For some reason, the cook feels that it is my job to tell him what to make, and it cannot
That is my point.
My
That
husband
is
is
my
a
point.
writer. He works from home, but he cannot ask him. He will call up and he has this tone, okay, which is very annoying. Bhabhi, khane ke liye kya banaye? And now I just say whatever, but I don't even mind saying Maggi noodles. But now I don't slip off the chair anymore.
Correct.
I say it.
I know, and I was telling the writer, "Hello, relax." And I said, "Okay, 5-minute break. I also have to tell what has to be cooked today." Well, I mean, these are the multiple hats that we wear, and I think, It's great.
I
You should,
sorry.
But is it great? Is it to be? I want to be provocative here, Monika. Is it great or is it not fair? Is it less than fair? I mean, anyone who wants to take that. Ashi, I think you wanted to come.
No, I wanted to say that my son was born 10 days after Lust Stories released, and I was still in the middle of doing all my deliverables to Netflix, and I had to send them a lot of things. And it was the evening before my child was born, and I was in the hospital, and I knew I'll keep getting calls. And I remember being taken inside the hospital room, and all I was telling my husband is, can you give my phone to my assistant so he can pick up the calls? I don't want him to think I'm unprofessional.
Yeah.
And he was like, what is wrong with you? And that's all I was thinking about when I was going inside. So, I mean, you do your best to balance everything. Of course, it's hard. Of course, there are times you feel that you're going to fail, and you are failing. Right. But
and so therefore, let me be provocative and ask, why are we expected to balance? Why are we expected to juggle? And why are we expected to not demand more equality?
Because there's a certain priority list that has been presumed that women would follow. It's as simple as that. You know, not all of us are blessed with women examples at home or early on in our careers. There's a priority list that comes down the grapevine, and we think that if we get a call from home, it's an embarrassing priority to focus on. Also, we're not allowed to have a certain comfort with failure. I think for me personally, for us actually, when we first started Mutant as well, is just we failed early on pretty quickly, and because we had each other and that perspective, and we worked with female directors right off the bat. That was what we wanted to do. All of us together in it was saying, failed, no problem, dust it off, have a shot of tequila, glass of wine, moving on. And that's really helped us build that resilience. But a woman failing, there's just so much more mirch masala put to it.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I actually think that a woman failing is not allowed, but a woman succeeding is even more resented, right? So,
absolutely.
so true.
I just wanted to say that my extended Punjabi family has had a hard time grappling with what I do. कि तुम करते क्या हो? You know, तो because I come from a very, very humble family, and producer in India is, people who finance, fund. So it's very difficult to make extended families understand. So they have one line for me, which I love now. पहले बहुत दुख होता था मुझे, but now I love. लड़की हमारी हाथ से निकल गई. So now I'm like, अब तो उड़ गई. Like अब तो मतलब. So I have seen the culture shift happen around this extended chatter. And Paglet, actually the movie that's our film that's coming out on Netflix in a couple of weeks now, is very close to the life that I have seen and lived. When people are saying कि अब इसका क्या होगा, है बिचारी, to now taking photos of every newspaper article and telling their neighbors कि वो हमारे ना भाई की बेटी है, वो ना. So now wanting to relate. कि गुनीत मैं ना तेरे बात कर रहा था, तू बात कर लेगी, so now wanting to associate. So the wanting to disassociate I've also seen, and now wanting to associate also. So it's interesting. It's the,
And I just want to share, I with our audience that the female labor force participation in India has declined. And if I were to unpack that in layperson's term, it basically means that fewer women are working in India than used to. So it looks to us that we're getting better at this, but actually we're getting worse. And one of the reasons is that not enough women, so many women leave the workforce because they can't do that juggling that is expected of them. And it's just something to pause and take note of. Now the elephant in the room. Are women terrible at talking about money? Who wants to take that first? Madhu, I'll start.
I don't think so.
No, absolutely not.
I don't think so. And the reason I say this is because I guess I've always been the money's person in every business that I've spearheaded, and particularly now. And any of the creative people, they shy away from those conversations, difficult conversations. And I just think you have to, it's a very brass tacks conversation. And sadly, when you're a woman talking money, again, it's viewed with very negative connotations. But I'm happy to trailblaze where that is concerned. And sometimes I think it's easier because the more uncomfortable the conversation, bring it on, and
take advantage of the cringe.
Yeah,
the other side, when they cringe when you talk monies.
Yeah.
There's fun to be had there. I have a lot of fun with it. I'm not saying,
Really?
We go 2, 3, 4 times and be silly about it. But sometimes the person in front is like, I can speak to your finance manager, and I said, she's also a woman. Acha, aapka CA, she's also a woman. So speak to any of us.
Yeah.
The conversation will be the same. And sometimes people do shut down. And I think it's important for us to have fun with it and not shut down along with them.
But in this business...
Is there anybody here who has a different experience with money?
I actually made much smaller budget films and was given a lot of guilt about because theatrical business is so different and such high marketing costs are needed. So I have had a coming of age in the business. So while I took pride in making a certain budget films that really went to had a global footprint, but distribution in India was totally in a bottleneck. So that guilt was always given. And then how do you even charge your fees or anything? How do you expect to be paid when your choices are like this? So I've had a coming of age because of digital and because of Netflix and because of the work that I'm doing now. I have given myself promotion and I have given myself agency and allowance to be paid, to be able to ask, to be able to say that I do really value add movies and not just things that fly by, so forever. So I've had to tell myself and promote myself.
Also, Barkha, if I can just add, this is where I feel that creators and stories make a difference, and if I were to just mention Bombay Begums, which is coming on Monday, is actually the story of women bankers. And what they face and the biases and how it is so not legit to see them be the person at the helm, and how their male colleagues perceive it, and how they just can't cut a deal, or they are expected to not be so hard or so good at what they do. So I think that is where everyone sitting here and so many people outside who put stories together, or executives like us, actually have a responsibility to make sure that we bring out stories of more creative, more equity, and more balance, more representation, so that sometimes you have to do something to show that it can be done. And
And of course, it's all a work in progress. So I do want to ask you all in the end or towards the end, is there a sort of creative product that you have made in the past that you wouldn't today because you recognize it to have been subliminally sexist, or your awareness of that issue has changed or shifted? I know a lot of actors, friends of mine, feel that about what goes by the name of item number, but those numbers are still very normalized at our shadis. We've all danced to them. We've seen little girls dance to them. There is a kind of hypersexualization, which is the flip side of women not owning sexuality. So I'm just want to push you all a little bit. Do you look back at something and say, oh my God, how did I do that? Or I would have done that differently? Like anyone?
Actually, no. I don't really look at all the content. Pretty proud of content that one has done and evolved. But I just feel like what Seher said, I connected with that. Maybe I should have stood up for myself in rooms differently and spoken and addressed situations offered to me differently and not internalized as I don't know enough, I am not good enough, I failed people, I failed expectations, to then moving up and saying this is how it needs to be done, to be owning it and saying I know what I'm doing. Because again, Lunchbox, Masan were first of its kind co-productions. There was a lot of new ways of doing business, raising money, but there was a lack of me standing up for myself. Yeah. So I feel like maybe that I should have done better.
All been there. Okay, last set of questions. What would you tell your 16-year-old self? If you could tell your 16-year self something, what would it be? I'll start with you, Ashvini.
At 16, actually, I didn't know, I couldn't speak not one sentence in Hindi. So I feel at that point, if somebody told me you would head not one, but two of the country's biggest Hindi channels, I think the 16-year-old would have died there and there. But yeah, I actually failed my, prelims are something that we have in the Maharashtra board exam also. I'm not sure everywhere, but so that sort of tells you what you're going to, that prepares you for what your results are going to be a month later in your board exams. And I had failed miserably in Hindi. And my Hindi class teacher had come and she had told me, "Beta, abhi tum Bhagwan pe chhod do, tumhara kuch nahi hone wala hai." So at that point, I don't think I would have. But I feel at 16-year-old, I was very confused. And so I feel, 10 years later, I was very different from I was very different at 26 than what I was at 16. So I was more focused. And also, I came from a different background. It was, there was equality, gender. It was also a very affluent family. So when I started my first job at 22, I realized actually human stories, and I started looking at the world differently. So I was a very different 16-year-old, and I was a very different 26-year-old. That decade actually changed me.
Yeah. Madhu?
Well, I think whether 16, 26, 36, the goalpost has kind of, it just keeps on shifting. And so, but I think at 16, I was pretty clear that, whatever I have to do it on my own. And so if I have to go places, if I have to put myself on a plane, train, or any automobile, I not only do I have to put myself there, I have to drive it. So I don't think much has shifted. But yeah, I think, worldview has changed, and I think the goalpost still keeps changing, So yeah, that's what I'd really say.
Monika?
Can I flip your question, Barkha? I don't want to look back and say to my 16-year self, because I can see my 16-year-old daughter, and it really.
What's the one thing you'd want her to know?
Exactly.
That you wish somebody had said to you when you were 16?
Yes, exactly. That's what. So I think the one thing that I really try to, demonstrate through how I am is to believe. Believe in herself. There will be so many people who will tell you to doubt yourself. But I think it is so important. I remember as a kid, we used to over and over again watch the film Polar Express. And because there's this little part where this, this dark-skinned girl who gets off, she's told by Tom Hanks that if there's one Christmas message, what would that be? And he just takes this little chit out and he says, believe. And, we had a little conversation around that. And she would keep telling me, Mama, can we go to that scene? Can we see that movie? And can we see that scene again? So I think that is something where I want her to know that, yes, life will be difficult. It'll be tough. It'll be friendly. It'll be all shades, But be your inner coach and not always your inner critic, because there'll be so many people who will be doing that job for you.
Yep.
So lovely.
Shivani? Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, Shivani?
I would say be your authentic self, but unapologetically. For me, I think I used to apologize a lot for who I was, how I was, and keep a lot kind of under the surface. So I would definitely say that, and I say that to myself now as well, because you're expected to be in certain kind of boxes all the time, and with every new project, whenever you work with someone new across the board, they do sometimes come in with that expectation. So yeah, I'd say that.
Seher?
I think I want to go slightly earlier, maybe my 6-year-old self. And actually the same. I'd want to follow what she was, because it was, I loved swimming, but I hadn't jumped off from the deep end, right? And I would constantly walk up to the diving board, and I remember that day so clearly, the first time I jumped in. And I was a really brave kid, and I think that's what I'd want to follow through in my life. Just be brave, brush it off, carry on.
And remember that if you do jump into the deep end, you will find a way to swim.
Yes.
And come up for air.
Exactly.
Ashi?
So my 16-year-old self has a quick story of you, because I remember being in that NDTV office in GK, and you got a phone call, or I don't know what happened. You just rushed out. You didn't wait for the cameraman. You didn't wait for anyone. And you just put something on your shoulder and you just started walking in that parking lot. And that evening, I was meeting a friend at that coffee shop in N Block, and she said, do you ever get to do something for Barkha, or you're just like, I said, I said, Barkha is really cool. She doesn't need anybody. Because that moment I saw you just walking, you didn't care about who was following. You just went, sat in your car, and you left. And I said, I want to be like her. She doesn't need anybody. So I remember that very clearly. I was 16 then, and you've been a huge inspiration. And it's been an honor to be here talking to you today.
That is such a
Barkha,
lovely
can I
story.
add
Thank
to
you.
that? Can I add to that as we were talking earlier, the kind of work that you've done the past few months, it's been an inspiration. And thank you so much. As citizens of this country, I think,
Yeah, absolutely.
and as fellow women, I think thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I was thinking of what Ashi said about just getting into a car and going off, and that's pretty much what I did last year with COVID. So I guess that eccentricity and that passion remains very alive, and that's what I would tell my 16-year-old self, that as long as you've got that, and you're unstoppable. Guneet, I didn't give you the last word on that 16-year-old self. Yes.
Yeah, I think I have always, this whole huge need of being loved, liked, has put me in extremely compromising positions where I've been like, I've overcompensated to be liked, that I hope I'm not overstepping, So I just feel like, you will find your people who will love you for who you are and who will celebrate you for who you are. So try owning yourself a bit more, and remember that, I was selling, I think I was selling cheese on streets as a 16-year-old and trying to be a DJ. And just that fearlessness, that, life will be good. And you'll find the best people around you. But I just always kind of, went back and forth on that for quite a few years after. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to say to all of you that, I think you underestimate how just looking at that one single shot of all of you sitting together, wearing your power, but also wearing your energy and your joy from that success is so lovely to see. I love unapologetic women. Please keep owning that absence of apology, and please keep owning that passion. It's been a joy talking to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.